My wife, Ava, and I were enjoying a night out at a fancy restaurant when I spotted someone familiar heading toward our table. Leaning in close to Ava, I whispered, "That's Damian Landis coming over. You remember me telling you about him, right? He's been my best friend since we were in second grade. But listen, be cautious, he's a notorious womanizer." Ava smirked and replied softly, "Well, I don't exactly have the kind of figure that would catch his eye, so I think I'm safe." "Isn't he the one who's ridiculously rich?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. I gave her a quick nod as I stood up to greet Damian. I extended my hand for a handshake, but Damian had other plans. He pulled me into a big, enthusiastic bear hug, which felt a little awkward given the upscale setting. "Ethan, man, it's so damn good to see you. It's been way too long since we've had some time together," Damian said, his voice booming with excitement. Then, as if on cue, his eyes shifted to Ava, scanning her from head to toe, lingering a little too long on her chest. "And this must be your beautiful wife, Ava, right? I couldn't make it to the wedding, I was in Singapore at the time, but I did send a gift. I hope you liked it," he added with a sly grin. Ava's face lit up as she stood to greet him. "Oh, you're the one who sent Ethan that new pickup truck, aren't you?" she said, holding her arms out for a hug. I quickly interjected, "Ava, this is my best friend, Damian. Damian, meet my wife, Ava. I've told her a lot about you." Damian, however, didn't wait for me to finish. He gently nudged me aside and wrapped Ava in a warm embrace. "Ethan, you didn't tell me your wife was this stunning," he said, flashing his signature charming smile. Ava, to my dismay, hugged him back, longer than I thought was appropriate for a married woman. "You never mentioned he was so tall and handsome," Ava said, glancing at me briefly before turning her attention back to Damian. "So, what brings you to Daytona, Damian?" she asked, her tone light and curious. "I just bought a condo over at the Dunes," Damian replied casually, "and I'm having it remodeled. For now, I'm staying at a hotel nearby and thought I'd grab a quiet dinner here." Ava tilted her head, intrigued. "You bought a condo at the Dunes? Aren't those practically brand new? What could you possibly need to remodel? I heard even the smallest units there start at over $1 million. Damian nodded, clearly enjoying the attention. "You're right, but the bedrooms felt a little cramped for my taste. Luckily, a penthouse was available, so I went for it. I'm having it repainted and replacing all the furniture." It was painfully obvious to me that Damian was pulling out all the stops to impress Ava. He had this uncanny ability to figure out exactly what a woman cared about and then steer the conversation in that direction. And Ava? Well, she was the definition of a material girl. I made a good living and had a decent amount saved up, but Ava's spending habits were enough to make anyone nervous. Tonight, we were supposed to be celebrating our 3rd anniversary, but instead, she seemed completely captivated by Damian. Even the other diners were starting to notice, throwing me sympathetic glances from across the room. Trying to regain some control of the evening, I said, "Ava, it looks like our food is here. Let's sit down and enjoy it while it's still hot." Ava didn't argue, but she barely glanced at the steaks as they were placed in front of us. Instead, she turned to Damian with a bright smile. "Damian, you have to join us. Ethan talks about you all the time, and I'd love the chance to get to know you better. My husband's best friend is my friend too." Damian hesitated, looking at me as if to gauge my reaction. "I wouldn't want to intrude on your romantic dinner," he said, his tone polite but clearly tempted. "Nonsense," Ava cut in before I could respond. She waved over the waiter. "Could you set a place for Damian? He'll be joining us for dinner." "Thank you so much." And just like that, my quiet anniversary dinner turned into a 3-person affair. The waiter spun around and hurried off to prepare a place for Damian. In no time at all, Damian was seated at our table, effortlessly taking over the conversation. While he and Ava chatted away about anything and everything, I found myself tuning them out. I even managed to win a game of solitaire on my phone before Ava's voice broke through my mental escape. She was addressing me directly. "Ethan, we've got 2 spare rooms at home. Why don't we have Damian stay with us for a bit? You two could spend more time catching up, and he'd get to enjoy some home-cooked meals. His condo will be ready in a week or so, and it wouldn't be any trouble at all," she suggested, her tone light and casual. I was floored. Ava thought Damian would enjoy her cooking. That was laughable. I knew full well she'd be ordering pricey takeout from upscale restaurants and serving it on her finest china, passing it off as her own. And knowing Damian as I did, I was pretty sure he'd be eating at the Y before the week was out. I had warned her about his reputation as a womanizer, but I couldn't help but notice how her figure, curvy and alluring, would appeal to someone like him. My mind drifted for a moment to my first wife, Diane. We'd been married for 22 years before she passed away suddenly from a heart attack 5 years ago. Diane and Damian had been close friends, but I never once worried about anything inappropriate between them. Diane was the epitome of loyalty and trustworthiness. After her death, I spent over a year grieving before I met Ava at a charity event. She was 11 years younger than me, but that didn't seem to bother her. I proposed not long after, and we've been married for 3 years now. It was her second marriage. She divorced her first husband after catching him cheating, or so she claimed. One thing I knew for sure was that I'd never cheat on my wife. It just wasn't in my nature, and Ava was well aware of that. It didn't take much effort on Ava's part to convince Damian to stay with us. Then again, her persuasion included leaning toward him, her cleavage on full display, as she hung on his every word. Her chest seemed to have a mind of its own, swaying, bouncing, and straining against her dress as if trying to escape. Damian, of course, was mesmerized, his eyes glued to her in open admiration. Unlike me, Damian didn't have to wake up early for work. That's a burden reserved for those of us who don't have millions in the bank and more rolling in every day. Ava, for her part, hadn't worked a day since divorcing her first husband. She'd done quite well in that divorce, apparently. Before we got married, she had me sign a prenuptial agreement ensuring I'd never have any claim to her money, no matter how long we stayed together. I didn't mind. I had a solid income from my investments and a great job to boot. When I got home Monday evening, I noticed that Ava and Damian seemed even chummier than they'd been at the restaurant the night before. Dinner was ready, and it was delicious. But my suspicions were confirmed when I checked the trash can and found takeout containers from a high-end local restaurant. As the two of them laughed and chatted in the living room, I left in a bit of a huff, stomping upstairs to bed. My dramatic exit went completely unnoticed. They were too wrapped up in their own little world to care. By Wednesday evening, I was in for another surprise. When I walked through the door, Ava was sitting on the ridiculously expensive couch she'd insisted we buy. Sitting next to her, far too close for my liking, was Damian. "Ethan, we need to talk," Ava said, her tone serious. I froze, caught off guard. It was only Wednesday, and somehow Damian had already worked his magic. I knew he was good at getting what he wanted, but this was next level impressive. Whatever this talk was about, I had a sinking feeling it was going to cost me more than just a few bucks. GPT-4o. Here's the rewritten version of the next part of your story. Amazing as it sounds, Damian and I have realized we're soulmates, Ava began, her voice dripping with a mix of guilt and resolve. We didn't plan for this to happen, Ethan, but it did. The connection between us is undeniable, and we both feel awful about it. But there's no point in pretending otherwise. I'm going to divorce you. Once it's finalized, Damian and I will get married. Please don't try to change my mind, it's already made up. I stared at her, my blood boiling. You think I'm just going to roll over and hand you my house and half of everything I've worked for because you couldn't keep your legs together and this clown couldn't keep his zipper up? Not a chance. I'll fight you every step of the way, I shot back, trying to sound more confident than I felt. Ava's expression hardened, her tone turning icy. That's exactly the kind of response I'd expect from a small, insecure man, she said with a sneer. For your information, I didn't marry you for your money, and I don't want a dime of it when we divorce. Damian and I both agree that this will go much faster if I just walk away with what I brought into the marriage. So, what do you say, Ethan? Is that enough of an incentive for you to give me a quick divorce? She demanded, her eyes boring into mine. I smirked bitterly. Where do I sign? I replied, my voice dripping with sarcasm. I always knew money mattered more to you than I ever did. Ava didn't even flinch. I'll be staying with Damian for the next few nights while we wait for his condo to be finished. I don't want to hear any complaints, no whining, no crying, and definitely no pathetic attempts to guilt me, she said firmly, as if she were laying down the law. I didn't bother arguing. I just nodded, turned on my heel, and walked out the door. The nearest bar seemed like the only logical destination. It's incredible how quickly a divorce can move through the courts when all three parties involved are eager to get it over with, and when one of them has deep pockets. A few months later, I was officially a single man again. The weekend after the divorce was finalized, I found myself back at the same restaurant where Ava had first met Damian. As fate would have it, there he was, sitting at a table for two. Without hesitation, I walked over and sat down across from him. Damian greeted me with a wide grin. So, do you want to kiss my feet here in public, or would you prefer somewhere more private? He asked, his tone as smug as ever. I leaned back in my chair, unimpressed. I don't know what you're so happy about. You didn't have to marry Ava. Now she's free to come after you for fraud, breach of promise, or just for being the lying, manipulative jerk you are, I said, my words laced with venom. Damian didn't even blink. That's not going to happen, he replied calmly, his confidence unshaken. As usual, Ethan, you're missing the bigger picture. I raised an eyebrow, leaning forward. All right, then. Why don't you enlighten me? Because I know Ava, and if there's one thing she's good at, it's being stubborn, vindictive, and downright mean. So, tell me, what's your big plan? Didn't you feel the same way about her when you asked her to marry you? I asked, my voice dripping with skepticism. Damian chuckled, shaking his head. Think about it, Ethan. What was the final straw for you? What made you decide you couldn't stand being married to her anymore? He asked, his tone almost playful. I don't know, I began, shaking my head. Maybe it was finding out her personal trainer was screwing her 3 times a week. For some reason, that was the final straw for me. It just flipped a switch in my brain. The worst part was knowing she had me cornered. Even if I filed for divorce on grounds of adultery, she'd still walk away with half of everything I owned, plus spousal support. That's why I called you for advice. I never imagined you'd get her to ask for a divorce by Wednesday, though. That was incredible. Your ability to spin a line of nonsense must have gotten a lot better over the years, I added with a wry smile. Damian laughed, clearly enjoying himself. It's not so much my nonsense that's improved, it's my portfolio. Once she got a whiff of how much money I had, she couldn't throw herself at me fast enough. I'll admit, though, I'm going to miss her in bed. Being with your wife was one of the most memorable experiences of my life, he said, grinning like the cat that ate the canary. I frowned, not amused. That particular talent of hers is what got me into this mess in the first place, I replied, my tone serious. You did a hell of a job getting me out of a marriage to a gold digger, but aren't you worried about how she'll react when you dump her? She's not stupid, Damian. She might figure out the whole scheme. Sure, she's a cheater, but she's also sharp as a tack, I warned. Damian leaned back in his chair, his grin widening. Remember when I mentioned the big picture? He asked, his voice calm and confident. As an engagement gift, I gave Ava a weekend at the Ritz, complete with a spa day. I stared at him, dumbfounded. You idiot, I snapped. Didn't I tell you her personal trainer, the guy she was sleeping with, is now working as a masseur at the Ritz? She could have run into him there. I exclaimed, my frustration mounting. Damian's smirk didn't falter. Oh, I didn't just know about it, I planned for it. I specifically requested him by name when I booked her spa day, he revealed, his tone dripping with satisfaction. Last night, I decided to swing by her room to see how much she was enjoying my gift. Since I paid for the room, I had a key. And, lucky for me, I had my phone set to record video. Let's just say I found her very happy with her gift. She was with him. I blinked, trying to process what he'd just said. Wait, you have a video? She was cheating on you? I asked, my mind racing to catch up. You must have been furious. Were you angry enough to call off the engagement? I questioned, still trying to piece it all together. Damian chuckled, his smirk turning into a full-blown grin. Oh, Ava was absolutely devastated by my unforgiving attitude, he said, his voice dripping with mock sympathy. She swore it was the first time she'd ever done anything like that and promised it would never happen again. And you know what? I agreed with her, it won't happen again. At least, not with me. She's out apartment hunting right now, though I imagine she's alternating between sobbing and cursing my name. I couldn't help but laugh at the absurdity of it all. You really pulled it off, didn't you? I said, shaking my head in disbelief. Damian leaned forward, his grin as wide as ever. You owe me a dinner for getting her to say she wanted a divorce by Wednesday, he said, clearly pleased with himself. I laughed again, this time with genuine relief. You saved me a fortune, man. I'll gladly buy you dinner. You've always had my back. Ava might not have a clue about what real love is, but you do. That's what friendship is all about, I said, raising my glass in a toast. And that, my friends, is the end of today's story. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up and leave a comment below. Your support helps the algorithm share my content with more people. And if you're new here, make sure to hit that subscribe button, it really helps me keep creating stories like this for you. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.